Hello, and welcome to the Graphic Novel of the Month Club, the Comix Experience Graphic Novel of the Month Club, presented by The Beat. Gotta remember to do that.
Yay Beat.
Yay Beat. For the month of November. And we are here, our book this month is The Awesome Mage by the awesome, legendary, I can use that word with you, you're like one of the few people I can actually use that word with. The legendary Matt Wagner, who's here live with us. This is really kind of, a career interview for me, I gotta say. We're about to come up on our 30th anniversary here at the store. I firmly believe I wouldn't have a store if it wasn't for Matt. I'm gonna tell this story too.
You go, man.
Because I like this story. And the statute of limitations, I'm sure, has passed. So here's the secret origin of Comix Experience. We're going to digress a minute here before we get into talking about Matt. But I was 15, 16 years old. I was working at a store that was just a couple blocks away from here. I was the manager. Actually, I probably wasn't the manager of the store yet at that point. I was just the person who worked at that store. And
because you were loose at that con. So.
Yes, yeah. Right, exactly. And so the owner, it was the kind of owner that you don't want to have as an owner. Like, they do everything wrong. And my example in this particular case would be that he had 5 or 6 people working his table at San Diego Comic-Con, and he bought us one hotel room for the 6 of us. We were all just meant to sleep on the floor. I mean, which is fine, actually, when you're 15, 16 working at a show. That's, it's relatively fine. Yeah. But I sure as hell didn't want to be in that stinky room full of stinky guys. And so I went and found who was at that point one of my comic book heroes, Matt Wagner, and I kind of puppy dogged on his table. I mean, I remember being down on my knees on the edge of the table, just watching and listening. Oh, Matt Wagner, please tell me your comic-y wisdom. And Matt was nice enough to, hearing my situation, going, well, I'm going to go to this party afterwards. Do you want to go and hang out with me? And I'm 15, 16 years old, and my hero just went, hey, come and hang out with me. And I went, yes. And it turned out to be Dave Sims' San Diego suite in 84, which was,
couldn't have been 84.
86 then.
Yeah,
okay.
It was after the Mage tour.
Okay,
yeah,
86
then. 85,
yeah. Which was one of the legendary San Diego Comic-Con parties. I mean, this was... now they have parties, right, like where you need guest lists and it's all fancy, but then this was just the party that everybody went to because it was
back in the day when there was only one party at San Diego. Yeah. It was usually in some dude's suite. In this case, Dave Sims.
Yep, and you had to know where it was and what was going on, but everybody who was anybody in comics who was there at the show was there. And I felt like, oh my God, I get to hang out with all these people and it was the 80s, so there was excess. My memory is that, and this is great actually, because you can tell me, no, your memory is way wrong about this point. But my memory is it was a suite, so there were 2 rooms with a living room in the middle, and my memory is that there was a glass table in the middle of the room, and I remember someone bringing a freezer bag worth of Coke out and putting it out on the table. Because this was the 80s. You did a lot of Coke back in the 80s. And also, comics made a lot of money back in the 80s, so people felt like they could just, snort it up their nose and not really worry about it, It's interesting, comics kind of don't have drugs in them anymore at all. But boy, there was a moment. Yep. In fact, I remember, and I'm pretty sure about this, that someone flew back up to Los Angeles that night to score...
San Jose.
To San Jose? Okay, even further. Jesus Christ, I see Los Angeles was stretching credulity enough. Okay, someone flew back up to San Jose to score more cocaine.
Just the sum.
Sure, okay, right. The point was that was the time when you could just hop on an airplane and go and get more cocaine and come back.
The same day.
And it would work, right? That doesn't happen anymore, probably for the better. So it gets down to the dregs of the party, 3, 4 in the morning, and I remember it's me and Matt. Again, my memory is Dave Sim, Harlan Ellison, and Gary Groth. Back when Harlan and Gary were not mortal enemies.
Yeah, that sounds about right. And Gerhard.
And Gerhard, yeah. And they're having this fantastic, really intellectual, smart conversation about comics, and I'm saying whatever fanboy nonsense I say, but I'm not getting, nobody's like, shut up. You know, it's just like, okay, let's go back to our conversation, you know, but I felt at home there, and a little cartoon light bulb literally went off over my head, and I said, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. So I want to thank you, or perhaps blame you.
I said, sorry, man.
Yeah, but probably thank you for sending me careening on this path. So with that, I'm really, really honored to have you here to talk about this book, which has been so important to you. It's been important to me. It's been important to a lot of people. To him? Yeah. Brennan's here too. Jordan, will you click over just to show that Brennan's here? We have Brennan Wagner here also. Say yay! Or maybe he's not on the screen?
He's always on the screen.
Oh, no, I'm just saying on the feed. So, oh, never mind. Okay, shut up. I don't know. It's all technical. Man, I'm just talent. Good.
My very talented son, who's also my colorist on this series.
Yeah, that's super cool. Okay, so let's go. Let's start. Let's start way back. Let's start at the beginning. Why comics? Especially, in that early part of the 80s.
Why comics? I grew up reading comics. My mom was an English teacher, so I was born in 1961. So this is through the mid-'60s, and she just always insisted that I read. Unlike a lot of English teachers of her day, she didn't mind that I was reading comics. I was reading. She thought I'd grow out of them. But I was telling Brian, as we had dinner tonight, one thing she did was, in that day, when you got to the point of purchase checkout at the grocery store, instead of the National Enquirer and Us Magazine, they would have racks of Classics Illustrated. And she would always buy me Classics Illustrated. So that's the first place I read Robert Louis Stevenson and Dickens and Shakespeare, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I was an only child. I grew up out in the country. My parents had tried to have kids. Didn't work. They built what they thought was going to be their retirement home. They moved in. 3 months later, she got pregnant. Mm-hmm. So I grew up kind of alone. I'm an only child out in the country. There wasn't a lot of video entertainment in those days. And I read and I drew to entertain myself, and comics were both writing and drawing all in one little tidy package. I eventually decided I wanted to be an artist. I went to a liberal arts university in Virginia as an art major, and I will say my parents, who didn't have an artistic bone in their body, were very supportive, but they did sit me down at one point and say, look, are you sure this isn't a hobby? Are you sure you want to have to do this every day for the rest of your life? And of course I said, yeah, not knowing what the hell it was. But so I went 2 years to this liberal arts university, then I transferred to an art college in Philadelphia. It was there, on the elevator one day, a guy's wearing a Creation Conventions t-shirt. That was a line of conventions on the East Coast back in the 80s. And we struck up a conversation. And that was Bill Cucinato, who was later one of the founders of Comico. So we all had this kind of burning desire to kind of start our own thing. At that point, you were seeing independent art in many different media. Of course, the advent of independent cinema with the work of Scorsese, beginning with Easy Riders and moving up through Scorsese and Coppola and et cetera. And at the same time in music, of course, you had punk rock, and that had a real do-it-yourself aesthetic as well. And so we wanted to take the same approach to comics, which was we don't need the big characters, we don't need the companies, we want to do it ourselves. And eventually we all dropped out of school to follow that mad dream, and and it worked out.
Yeah.
Slowly. I mean, it was a big deal for my parents when I told them I was going to drop out of school after they'd sent me to school for that long.
Yeah.
But,
when you went to school, obviously there wasn't a comics program.
No, and in fact, the art school I went to, they were like, oh, cartoons? You mean like the New Yorker? Because that's the only one that's worthwhile, And we were all like, no, like Batman. That didn't get a good reception ever. We just kind of did it ourselves, We put out a school, a little in-school zine called Duckwork. So it was a mixture of school news and duck cartoons. The one guy, Jerry Giovinco, one of the founders of Comico, was duck obsessed. So my gig was doing duck takeoffs of movie posters.
Right.
So I did Raiders of the Lost Duck, Duck Throat. What was it? It was Roller Duck. And then eventually they dropped out of school to like start this publishing company. I dropped out about a year later.
Okay.
Initially, I worked out at their offices, which are just outside of Philadelphia. I took the train up every day, and then we started. We did an initial line of black and white comics.
Yeah.
Which didn't really take off. For one thing, the other three guys there were four of us. We each did 4 titles. The other guys were, focused more on being businessmen and publishers.
Sure.
I was the only one that wasn't part of the publishing scene, so I could draw more. I could, focus more on that. So then they decided this is just pre the black and white boom of the 80s. And we decided black and white wasn't working out. We had to go color. They signed Chuck Dixon and Judith Hunt, his wife at the time, to do a book called Evangeline, which is about a killer nun in the future, a nun who's secretly an assassin for the Vatican. And at the time, I don't even know if this is true anymore, but at the time, it was always cheaper to print 2 books at once. They called it gang printing because the printing presses were so wide that you could fit 2 books. So out of the 4 of us, they said, who had the best response to we can't afford to hire anybody else, but who had the best response, and it was Grendel. So at that point, I was rolling to let Grendel die, and that's when I developed Mage.
Yeah.
And there's actually a little more story to it than that. So I had an interest in King Arthurian legend. I had a girlfriend in high school who liked King Arthur a lot, and through her, I discovered the Mary Stuart trilogy. Do you know that series? It's a
from
series,
Merlin's point of view.
Yeah, series of novels, and it's all told from Merlin's point of view, and he's kind of a psychic druid. It's more intelligence and that sort of thing than actual magical powers, but. And then around the same time, I saw the film Excalibur, which was just fantastic. Of course, had both Merlin and the sword as big parts of the mythos. So I decided to develop a thing about King Arthur coming back in modern day.
Yeah.
And the original version of it was much more boring and traditional. I only did 2 pages of it. The guy was like in a futuristic setting, and there were mutants that needed to be defeated, and he had a cape, and
So you invented Camelot 3000?
Basically, then DC announced they were going to do Camelot 3000, and I was like, well, there goes that idea. Besides that, Brian Bolin guy draws a whole lot better than I do, so I just shelved it, and then Camelot 3000 came out, and it just didn't do anything for me because it was too much. What I had been doing, and I realized that what I had been doing wasn't why it didn't work for me. Was it didn't speak to me? There was no. It was just the same. King Arthur was wearing a Superman costume basically. Right. It was red, yellow, and blue. Right. And they were in the modern world running around with plate armor and swords and spears and shit. And my thought was, I don't know anybody like that. I don't know anybody who carries a sword. I know guys running around the back alleys in t-shirts and jeans. And, occasionally somebody would have a baseball bat stuffed under the seat of their car just in case. So one day I was down at the docks of Philadelphia, and I was doing some sketches. And one was a sketch of myself looking kind of world-weary. And another one was the character that ultimately became Mirth. Yeah. And so from there, I decided they offered me this chance to develop another series in color. And from there, I developed the idea for Mage from that. Yeah. I wasn't as aware of its meaning, its symbolism, its personal reality. I was just plugging ahead, I, just like Kevin himself in the story, I discovered through the act of doing it how it was going to work out.
Sure. Well, you can see it on the page too, because and I don't mean this the wrong way. Like those first couple issues are
great.
They're pretty bad.
Sure,
you can't draw, man. You're still figuring it out.
Yep.
And that's kind of what I love about it is that you can see issue to issue, like, oh, he learned how to tell the story and how to control it, and it's pretty fantastic stuff.
And I have a funny tale, almost in line with the San Diego tale. I shared a studio at that point with a bunch of guys in Philadelphia: Bill Willingham, Neil Vokes, Rich Rankin,
who were also all doing Comix books.
And one night, and I think it was issue 4 or 5, I went over to the studio because they were all kind of like day dudes. They worked during the day.
Right.
And I am that now. But back then, I wanted some time in the studio alone. And I showed up real late at night, like 11 o'clock at night, and I rolled a couple joints, and I sat over in the corner, and I was working on the coloring for the book, and all of a sudden, everything just kind of started to make sense.
Right.
It was like, oh, this leads to that, and this is positioned here, and look how the color can do this, you know. And it wasn't just a pod, man. It was there was an act of becoming there, you know. And here I'll tell the story of what coloring was like back in those days. We used a process on the first Mage series called blue lines. Now, this is way back in the 80s. Before that, everything was what they called flat color, very mechanical. This was the first instance where you could actually use paint as opposed to, painting whole pages. So I would produce my line art. Then the publisher would reproduce that in 2 versions on acetate. One, a positive image, and one, a negative image. So then there was this company that sold this stuff, these chemicals for what they call blue lining, where you would take any paper surface you wanted. I used watercolor paper. You treat it with this chemical. You lay that negative down, and then you expose it to sunlight. I went to Woolworths and bought a sun lamp, a tanning lamp, and we turn that on for 5 minutes, and you turn that off, and you remove that negative, and there's a blueprint of the line art. Shows you exactly where to color, and I used a combination of watercolors, and at that point, there was a product in the market that was an airbrush for art markers. So if anybody's been in an art supply store, there's these racks and racks and racks of many colors markers. They made this thing that was like a little gun that the marker fit into, and then a nozzle blew you hooked it up to an air generator, and a nozzle blew a stream of air across the tip of the marker and spat off the ink from the marker. And it wasn't very smooth, so it wasn't big enough to really do nice paintings or anything. Yeah. But I was doing these pages this big, the color part, the reproduction size. So for the backgrounds, these little shapes, it just worked beautifully. Yeah. And we had to do that process with every page.
Yeah.
And then they would take the positive line work and marry it up to the underpainting, and there you had your finished page.
Yeah. If any of you are interested in this, I have the page on the wall over here from Batman Grendel, Joe Matt's Colors, which is this process we're describing. It was done the same way, yep. And so I can show you after the show. I can lift up the acetate, and you can see underneath. It's really cool. It's the reason I never framed that.
Oh yeah, because you couldn't see it up close. Joe actually, I was living in San Jose when we did that, and Joe actually came and stayed with us. Yeah. And of course, in San Jose, we didn't need the sun lamp; we just took it outside.
Right. That's cool. Oh, that's super cool.
Yeah.
Oh, wow, that's neat. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
What was the decision to make Kevin look like you?
It was instinctual.
Yeah.
And I think every truly great artist, particularly every great comic book artist and cartoonist, discovers an alter ego version of themselves. Sure. Everybody knows Charlie Brown was Charles Schultz, period. If anybody ever saw Dave Stevens when he was alive, he was the Rocketeer. He looked just like Cliff Secord. I maintain that if anybody knows Jeff Smith, he's Bone. He's Bone walking around.
Dave Sim pretty much a Cerebus.
Yep.
Pretty much.
Yep. And the same is true for so many. It usually has to be a singular voice, not a team. But
Neil Sandman.
Yeah. So I didn't really. It wasn't a conscious decision.
Right.
Similarly, I didn't. Of course, since then I've followed the work of Joseph Campbell, who was a famous mythologist and wrote a terrific book called The Hero with a Thousand Faces, where he outlines the 3 stages of the classic hero's journey, the archetype of the hero's journey. I didn't know any of that when I did the first Mage series. I only read that book afterwards, and when I got to the first stage, I read it, and it was like a plot by plot point. It was like, I was like, wow, got that one right. Got that one right too. So just stumbled into it. Then it became evident to me that was what was making it special.
Yeah.
That was what was making it what I was missing
right.
from Camelot 3000. Because Camelot 3000, let's face it is a beautiful, professionally produced thing.
Yeah.
It just didn't have anything to say to me.
Yeah.
And part of it was, I thought it was just missing that sense of personal investment.
Sure. Sure.
Then, of course, it became, especially with the second series, then I knew.
Yeah.
This is what I like to call it, as an allegorical autobiography. Because I don't really think I have a magic baseball bat and I fight monsters.
Sure.
But it's a metaphor for the monsters.
Bad.
The monsters. Yeah, I know. Too damn bad.
Yeah.
It's a metaphor for the monsters and ogres and dragons we all slay in our everyday lives.
Yeah. No, I agree. Issue, I want to say 6 or 7, Sam Keith came on and started inking.
Sam Keith came on because all of a sudden, that one night with the joints and the color, all of a sudden color was really working for me, and I really wanted to focus on the color. And it just was not going to be possible for me to write, draw, ink, and color a book.
Yeah.
Even with Sam coming on, it was bi-monthly.
Yeah.
It would have been quarterly if I was doing that all myself. And Sam had a short story in Kimiko Primer, their new talent book, and he used a brush. He was very brushy, and I liked using a brush when I inked. And I asked him. I did a sample page of pencils, just shots of Kevin and Edsel and Mirth doing stuff, and he inked it. And I was like, "You're on, man."
Yeah. So everything. It feels like everything changed at that point, right?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Everything kind of became.
But also the book really started to take off then.
You mean as far as people recognizing it?
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah,
like the commerciality of it, right?
Yeah.
Like because.
And then shortly after that, I did the Mage tour. This was 1985. Dave Sim had just done his Aardvarks Across America tour. He and I spoke about it. He said his circulation went up X amount when he did that.
Yep.
So I thought, I'm going to try and do that. And I talked Kimiko into renting me this tricked out van, and me and 3 of my buddies drove all the way around the country. We were on the road 2.5 months. We covered over 13,000 miles, and we did 27 signing appearances.
Amazing.
Wow. It's amazing we survived.
Yeah.
It was rough.
Who was on the tour with you?
Nobody you'd know. And they switched off here and there. Like at one point, one guy flew back because his girlfriend was breaking up with him.
Right.
And the other guy flew. So.
Yeah.
But.
Yeah, and then you're out there and you're meeting people and you're.
Yep. Meeting people and seeing all sorts of different aspects of the industry.
Yeah.
So because there were so many different types of stores that we appeared in, so many different types of readers and outcomes.
Yeah.
You know,
it was kind of the Wild West back then too.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. But certain spots like Comix and Comix, had a line down the block.
Yep.
Other places like in Indiana, it was me and the owner and his clerk, and that was it. So it really gave me a broad overview of the industry at the time.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was a very different industry back then.
Oh my God, yeah.
Yeah. You also did, as I recall, some of the earlier collections of a serialization. It wasn't really common. The Mage book.
The Mage book was old copies.
Yeah.
That they ripped the covers off and bound. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm, yep.
But nobody was doing reprints then, really. There were 20 or 30 books in print, maybe.
Yeah. Yep.
At the market.
Yeah, and in fact, not only the Mage books, but then the Dawning Starblaze editions. This was a publisher in Virginia, Norfolk, Virginia, who had done the ElfQuest collections and A Distant Soil, Colleen's A Distant Soil, and they wanted to do Mage. None of us. Kimiko was a publisher; they could have done this themselves. Everything was in such transition as to what being a comic publisher and a comic retailer was, that we thought we needed to farm that out to somebody else to get the kind of, I guess, veracity of we're got a big book publisher interested, And
it was weird too. Well, not weird, but I mean, because those were really high end reprints.
Yeah.
Relative to the time. I mean, I want to say those were like $70 books or something.
No. They were about 20, I think.
No, they were more than that. The slipcases?
Oh, the slipcase editions. Yeah. I thought you meant this.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the slipcase editions were something like $70 or something.
Yeah, that was not. There were not a lot of examples of material like that.
Yeah. I guess they're right. Yeah.
Where you've got your trade, you've got your hardcover, you've got your slipkey, like you're kind of the proto. Here's how comics are supposed to work, and I guess my question is how much of this was you helping invent this, and how much of it was this is what it should be? Because nobody else was doing it, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Well, of course, not much premeditation, stumbling through most of it, just grabbing opportunities that came, again, comics were so redefining itself. In fact, that's what led to Comix's downfall, was they felt they had to follow the path of both Marvel and DC and get into newsstand distribution. Yeah. And that killed them because you have to print so much overprint and then you have to swallow that. And if you don't have, mob ties, you can't survive that.
Yeah. What did your circ hit?
By the end on Mage?
Yeah.
Around 40, I think.
Okay.
For back in that day, it was real healthy.
And that's real money, right?
Mm-hmm,
yeah.
Yep.
When you're 20 something.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Here's a fun tale, too. I was wrapping up the last issue just about the same time that Comix was getting ready to have their Christmas party for that year. And they had a history of not being very good at staging those parties. And so I had this really cool apartment in Philadelphia at that time. It was in a converted convent, and my apartment used to be the chapel. So it was real neat looking, and it was big. Mm-hmm. And I said, "Look, you guys fund it, and we'll have it here. We'll have it here at my apartment." And they agreed to that. So we had kind of just finished coloring, like the example that Brian says you can take a look at over there. Mm-hmm. All the color pieces for the final issue. So I went out and got foam core, and I mounted these all in foam core, and under plexiglass, I had the entire last issue wrapping all the way around my apartment.
Oh,
so
cool.
at that Christmas party, you could walk around and read the whole final issue before it was even printed. Yeah. So that was pretty cool. Yeah.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. So,
I'll never forget, Bob Chapman from Graffiti Designs flew out for that.
Yeah.
And right in the middle of the party, he went out to his car and he brought in this big suitcase and just dumped it in the middle, and it was all full of Mage t-shirts. It was party favors.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Super cool.
Yeah.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
And so, like, in merchandising and stuff like that at that time, I mean, how much of your living is coming from that versus the circulation of the book? At
that time?
Yeah.
Well, then there's also sales of the original art. So I would say 60-30-10.
Okay.
Book.
Yeah.
Art, merchandise.
Yeah.
At times that juggles, but
But even that 10% was real money.
Oh yeah, sure, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Those things doesn't happen very often anymore.
No.
Yeah. Comix folds. Where does that leave Mage at that point? Mage is done, right? So
Mage was done. I had a slightly different deal on Mage than Grendel. Grendel was a little more tied up in their bankruptcy proceedings, whereas Mage wasn't.
Yeah.
So I was able to wrest Mage away fairly quickly.
Yeah.
But I was also, I think initially I intended to move on to the second one pretty quickly. Mm-hmm. I didn't imagine it. I did imagine it being so distinctly reflective of such distinctly different periods of my life. I thought I was just gonna keep going and just keep telling. Mm-hmm. So the events that happened in the first series, I was producing that kind of concurrently as they were happening to me. The second series was about 5 to 6 years removed from, and then of course the current series is almost 20 years removed.
Sure.
And all I can say is that that's the way it had to work. I needed that distance to view the events of my life and get a perspective on them. In the case of the current one, of course, it features my alter ego and my wife's alter ego and our kids. I needed our kids to grow up. I needed to see what sort of people they were going to be.
Sure.
And that informs how their characters are in the book. So yeah, Mage was back in my hands easier than Grendel was.
Yeah. Did they have the film? Like, you have to
that was
it? Like,
that was a pain in the ass too. That was what finally happened was, okay, so let's skip forward a little bit. When I finally decided now's the time to do the second series, The Hero Defined, Grendel had been at Dark Horse for a while at that point. And I learned my lesson from the first time. I'm not going to put both these eggs in the same basket. So I decided I needed to spread out, diversify, and take it somewhere else. And this was in the days when Image had just started out. They were probably 5, 6, 7 years old, something at that point. Yeah. Had, of course, a lot of commercial success, but not a lot of critical success. So when I approached Larry Marder, who was their... I don't know what his title was. Was he publisher?
He was
chief
something.
Dude.
He was the
chief dude.
Yeah.
When I approached him, the fact that they had this kind of like indie auteur, critically acclaimed guy wanting to work with them, they were like, "Yes, we'll do whatever it takes." So that worked out well, but we wanted to get the first series back into print. And of course, since Kamiko had gone down the shitter, there was no film, nothing, nowhere.
Yeah.
Finally. Somebody somehow, I forget how Larry Marder got in contact with him, but he got in contact with Dawning, Starblaze.
Okay.
They still had the film.
Oh, amazing. Okay.
And we knew we were going to digitally recolor it all, so all we needed was the black plate.
Yeah.
So we struck a real, they were like, this is just moldering in our basement. Yeah. Sure, give us this much and we'll send it out to you, and that's how we were able to do it.
Nice. Because otherwise, you've long sold the art at that point.
Yep.
Yeah, what would have been the option? Like scanning it and bleaching it?
Yeah,
and
would have been awful.
Fixinizing it.
It would have been awful, and it would have been expensive. Yeah. But anyway, as it turned out, we were able to do it. And then Jeremy Cox, who colored the second series, just went back and used my initial coloring on the first series as a guide and just basically recreated that.
Yeah. How much did Kamiko lose you in terms of time and progress? Was it like 6, 7 years, I want to say? Or
before I got back to Mage?
Well, no, not just for Mage, but like...
That I was tied up and couldn't work on
that you were tied up and you couldn't...
No, not that long.
I just feel like there was all this stuff that you were going to do, and then you couldn't, and...
Well, put it this way.
Batman Grendel was tied up for 5 years.
It wasn't 5, no. It was tied up, and we moved... my wife and I were living in San Jose at the time, and we moved up to Portland because... So Diana Schutz, who has been my editor for years and years and years, I'm married to her younger sister. So Diana had started working with Dark Horse and said, why don't you come up here? Prices are great on real estate and everything up here, and I'll get you a gig at Dark Horse right away. So that's when I did that Terminator one-shot. Somebody had that around earlier.
Yep. And we've got an original art page from that.
Oh, do you? Okay, with James Robinson.
Yep.
It was shortly after that my lawyer declared, we're done here, the rights are yours again.
Okay.
And that's when we did War Child. And it wasn't full 5 years.
Okay.
I would say more like 2 or 3. Seemed longer to me, too.
It's funny, in those pre-internet days, like, everything seemed... Because you know how people were like, oh, yeah, Watchmen took 3 years to come out? No, it took 13 months,
Yeah.
The 1 month they were late and everybody freaked out, Yeah, that's crazy. Do you think that, like, where you were in your career at that point, did it hurt you? Did it help you? I mean, it got you a high-profile gig doing this Terminator book.
I don't know. I don't know how my career would have gone. I've always I've done my share of work for the big guys, but it's always, if you look at the stuff I've done for the big guys, it's mainstream work, but it's done by an indie guy.
Sure.
It never really fits in with their look and their continuity. It's my version of everything. You know. So I don't know. In the long run, I think with Mage, I think it benefited me to have that kicked out from under me, having to reconsider everything, both career-wise and creatively.
Yeah.
I benefited from knowing that, I had thought I was going to jump right into it right away. Probably 2 or 3 years I was going to be back into doing Mage. Instead, it was more like 10 between the first and second one, something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, to the point that I think that everybody had given up on you doing it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I don't want to speculate on how it hurt me or helped me professionally because I don't know. Who knows?
Yeah.
But I think it helped me creatively.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
It always helps to have your creative assumptions. As again, I use the word kicked out from under you. When I first finished Mage, because the first Grendel graphic novel ran in the back of Mage. That year at San Diego, at what was at that point called the Kirby Awards, not the Eisner Awards, Watchmen and Dark Knight were up for like the same amount of awards, and right behind them was Mage.
Yeah,
like by only 1 or 2 nominations. And I was pretty young. I was probably finished in '86, so I was 25.
Yeah,
after finishing this epic, 2 epic storylines. And everybody was patting me on the back and telling me, good job, boy, you're doing everything exactly right. Mm-hmm. And I guess luckily I knew enough to be scared of that.
Yeah.
That's, I'm 25, I can't have everything figured out yet,
Yeah.
So that's when I decided to step back from Grendel and just write for other artists for a while.
Sure.
Force me to see through their eyes.
Sure.
Force me to experience other methods of visual storytelling. Mm-hmm. Forced me to collaborate because I hadn't at that point. I'd only done my own thing.
Yeah. Well, and you also started really doing a lot of formalistic stuff at that point.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
In terms of...
With Grendel especially, yeah.
With Grendel, yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely with Grendel. Like, how do you tell a story? Kind of an amazing creative experiment there.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah. Well, my idea was, now this has become kind of ubiquitous, but at the time my idea was... the only way, if we're going to do a monthly, Comix proposed to me, let's do a Grendel monthly. The only way that was going to stay interesting to me was if I just continually reinvented it. If I, to make it basically a continuing series of miniseries. Mm-hmm. To always go the unexpected route. Boom, now Grendel's a woman. Mm-hmm. Boom, now here's this guy that draws super indie, Bernie Miro. Mm-hmm. In fact, we, for the longest time, Diana Schutz did the letters column in Grendel, and she had, of course, the preceding Grendel was all. We don't spend too much time here on Grendel, but
no, it's fine.
The preceding Grendel story was real sexy, this tall, leggy woman, and lots of ninja looking shit, and then of course Bernie's was more urban and downtrodden and grungy, and Diana got a handwritten note one time, said, "Dear Diana, Bernie's got to go." And then it was signed by 10 kids. One was in crayon.
That's awesome.
He had that tacked up above his drawing table for years. Man. So
it just seemed like it was a really vital creative outlet. That you...
Well, I had absolute freedom. Nobody ever tried to tell me what to do.
Not just that you had absolute freedom, but you actually used that absolute freedom in a way that very few people genuinely do.
Yeah.
There was a point where we didn't know what we were going to get in Grendel any given month. It could be 32 panels a page, or it could all be prose. And
then all of a sudden the Pope's a vampire.
And the Pope's a vampire. Yeah. Was this challenging? Was this freeing? What were you?
Oh, it was very freeing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Very freeing. I was on fucking fire, man. It was a good time for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Why do we not have comics like that? Not necessarily that, but why don't we have comics like that today? Do you think?
I don't know. Harder to market, maybe, because we recently put all the Grendel stuff out in omnibus editions.
Yeah.
Previously, part of what appealed about Grendel was, it might not even look the same. Mm-hmm. We changed the logo all the time. It still was the basic letter forms, but, all of a sudden it had stitches, or all of a sudden it had sharp points, or all of a sudden it was real deco looking, Well, that's hard to market nowadays. At that point, it was a market strength, and now it's a market shortcoming because there are so many books.
Yeah,
people need to be able to know what they're looking for.
Yeah, yeah. Grendel's the darkness, Mage is the light.
Mhm.
I've always thought, and
I'm a Libra.
yeah, there you go. That makes sense. Yeah. So the second series of Mage. Did Larry approach you? Did you approach Larry?
I approached Larry.
Okay,
Yeah. Yep.
okay. And he fell over himself to like,
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
all right. Was Jeff at doing Bone there yet, or was that the next year?
Can't remember.
Okay, probably.
It was around the same time.
Yeah. Because Larry was really trying to transform.
Yeah.
Larry Martyr did Tales of Bean World, which, if you guys know your comics, you know that is about as indie of a comic as could be. And he was the head of Image Comics. That was like, it was the head of Topic Farm Productions in particular.
We just lost Brennan.
Yeah, he'll be back in a second. That was doing just the most, kind of
straight ahead superhero comics,
and kind of crassly so.
Yeah.
It's utterly fascinating to me that Image took this bend.
That was all due to Larry.
All due to Larry.
Yeah.
All due to Larry.
Yeah. I think he had said to the owners, the partners, of course, the 7 dudes that left Marvel to form Image.
Yep.
I think he said, if you want longevity here, like just these sales ain't going to be enough. You gotta have critical acclaim as well. And you have to have diversity.
Yeah.
Because truthfully, those guys all had a house look. It all looked very much the same.
Well, they were building their own studios. In fact,
Mm-hmm.
They're all like, okay, now we can cookie cutter. We can do all the things that we hated over there.
Yes, right.
Let's try that.
Right.
Can we hold the whip hand, please?
If you look into the abyss looks into you.
Pretty fucking much. Did you do? Because I honestly don't remember. Because the market was falling apart very close to then.
Mm-hmm.
Did you get in before the market fell apart on
kind of right on the edge?
Yeah. So you got some big numbers and
I got okay numbers.
Yeah.
It was not the Image numbers I was expecting.
Okay.
But then again, I wasn't doing the Image book that those people were buying.
Sure.
So,
absolutely.
So I think I was. It was foolish of me to expect that.
Yeah.
But I did okay.
Yeah. 2 becomes much more autobiographical.
Oh, very much. Yeah. But the first one is too.
No. Yeah. I get it, but okay.
First one is too. Edsel is kind of a combination of specifically her buttocks is a combination of like 2 or 3 girls I knew at the time. Okay, her build, I guess I should say. Mirth was a combination of 2 or 3 guys I knew at the time. My best friend at the time, his literal name was Sean Knight. So Mage was very, very instrumental to me at the time. I was living in Philadelphia. We would occasionally drive down to Atlantic City and go to a casino.
Right.
All the elements were there.
Yeah.
But in
the autobiography that I know.
Yes.
I know your comics industry part, so I knew who all those
recognize
people.
the elements.
I recognize the elements, exactly. No, let's go back to Mage 1 for just a second. Like, Edsel, I don't think you've ever gotten enough credit for having a person of color character that early in comics.
Man, it just didn't occur to me.
Yeah.
It didn't. Somebody just and I'm gonna publish this letter. Somebody wrote me a letter, and he's a big fan, and he brought up in the current mindset the troublesome aspect of in Discovered the black one dies.
Right. Sure.
And you could say, well, the woman dies too.
Right.
I prefer to think of it as a character you cared about died.
Yeah.
Because it just never occurred to me that well, so what? She's black.
Sure.
Sure. Well, I've always been the same with whenever I have a gay character in. Somebody asked me, why do you put gay characters in your comics? I said, because they exist.
Yeah. Yeah. But this wasn't a thing that was done very often.
Not very much, no. No.
Yeah. That's I don't know. I think it's important. That's all. All right. So 2. You're at Image. You're more autobiographical. Well, more, as I say, that I know comics industry stuff. What's the reaction from Bernie and Joe and Sim that you're actually putting them in the comic at that point?
Joe's the only one I'm still in contact with.
Okay. Joe's
always liked it. Never heard from Sim one way or the other.
Okay.
Of course, I had a fist fight, so that was probably not
right.
good. And Bernie, I don't know what Bernie thought. Because actually, the character Kirby Hero was actually a combination of Bernie and Sean Knight.
Okay.
The Sean that appears in the first one, I didn't know Sean Knight that well at that point. The character of Kirby Hero has a lot of Sean Knight in it. A lot of that boisterous, semi-self-destructive, Herculean sort of personality. But Bernie has a lot of that too. So, the real question is, what did my wife think when I put her in?
Yeah, that's also a question. Yeah. And what did your wife think?
She loved it.
Did she? Okay.
She loved it, yeah.
Okay.
It took me a while to learn how to draw her because I was used to looking at her in a different way.
Yeah.
But yeah, she loves it.
Yeah.
Especially loves the current version, which of course has our kids in it.
Yeah. And does she appreciate her powers and
sure, yeah,
things like that?
No. Every time I have one, like there's I don't know how far everybody is caught up on it, but there's a scene where she uses an umbrella to magically rise up, kind of Mary Poppins-y. But then they meet these creatures, and she pumps the umbrella, and it spews out this magic stuff that. And every one of those, she was like, "Oh, that's my next profile pic. Oh no, that's my next profile."
Oh, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. Do you talk to her about this at all in advance?
Not at all.
Not at all.
But I remember, Brennan. You probably don't remember this, Brennan. You were quite young. We were having dinner one night, and both you and your mom said something like, "Oh, I got some great ideas for Mage 3." And I was like, no! This is not a democracy. Nobody's writing Mage 3 but me. That's it. So I show her, when I'm done with the issue, we sit down and I show it to her.
Okay.
Like when I just finished the last issue of the current series, it was... Because, it's long. It's like 56 pages.
Right.
And she said, you haven't shown me anything in a while. So it was a long issue. And then finally, I showed it all to her. So. And she was like, "Wow, I'm actually kind of gonna cry." I think. Yeah.
Do you show it to the point where there's no tapbacks then, or
no? There's never any tapbacks. Yeah. She knows better.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. How about in the process between the books? Like, did you talk about it with her at all,
nope.
or
nope? And in fact, more than that. I kind of did this. This just happened between 1 and 2, but then, of course, as I've said, started out instinctual and became more purposeful. But between 2 and 3, I distinctly tried to not think about Mage at all.
Yeah.
Didn't want any preconceived notions. Didn't want to be stuck in something I thought of 8-9 years ago. There were a few. There were a few things. And this is a funny tale. The number 0 story here, where Kevin runs into the brash young hero named the Steez. I was this is in the early Image days. I was on my way back from a convention, and I'm on the plane, and there's obviously a guy next to me across the aisle, and he's obviously a comic book dude too.
Yeah.
And it turns out he's one of the Image studios that you're talking about. And this guy's still in the biz, and I will freely admit he's turned into a really awesome artist.
Okay.
He's great. But at the time, he was an inker. He had inked 6 or 7 issues of something. Right. And, of course, if you know that early Image stuff, he wasn't really adding anything of his own personality.
Sure.
And he just thought he was, cock of the block.
Sure.
And I remember saying to myself, and he didn't seem to know who the fuck I was at all. Like, I was completely unimportant to him. And I thought to myself, this is how Mage 3 begins. Kevin coming up with some young hero who doesn't give a shit about him.
Let me turn to you for a minute, Brennan. If you can hear me, right? Yeah. Okay. Good. Perfect. What was it like growing up, knowing that your dad was doing this semi-autobiographical comic, right? Before you were doing a comics yourself, right? Like, he's drawing your mom, and like, what is this? Explain this.
And his aunts, and both.
Both of his aunts. Yeah, exactly.
And his uncle, and
Well, I grew up reading tons of comics, and everything that Pop did, I was reading. So I was reading Grendel too, and it's just a world I grew up in. He used to take me out of school to go to conventions. Even it was just the life I lived.
Living the comics life. So, and let me ask you, when did you know you wanted to do comics, brother?
Oh, always.
Yeah?
Always.
You had some diversions. Tell them the Steve Siegel story. Sorry.
Oh yeah, well, for a bit in college, I dabbled a lot with photography, and I wasn't sure if I was going to go the route of telling stories through the lens of a camera or with illustration. I knew that I was interested in narrative, though, whatever it was. And it was Steve Siegel, who married me recently, who took a look at my portfolio of both photography work and illustration work. And he said, they're both good. You have an eye for composition and for shape and light, color, but illustration is a talent and a skill that would be truly a tragic loss if you gave that up. And he was right. So.
Nice. Did you go to school at all to study, or?
I did. I went to college, but just like Pop, I dropped out to do the goods, to make the books.
There you go. Were you going? Did you study comics particularly, or art in general? What was your major?
I took a few like making comics classes, but those seemed a little beginnery for me.
Sure.
I'd grown up around this so much.
Yeah.
I'd grown up around this, going to conventions and sneaking into my dad's studio and watching him draw and reading all the books that he gave me. That college, for the most part, seemed like I wasn't getting anything new. It was just kind of a rehash of stuff I'd already picked up over the years. A lot of the stuff in college was good to learn structure and deadlines and that kind of stuff. But ultimately, I just had to start doing it to learn.
So, well, because I don't know the answer to the question. What was the first? When did you first start working? What was the first thing you did, brother?
My first accreditation is actually the art of Grendel, as I did an internship when I was like 17 under Diana as editorial assistant.
Nice.
Yeah. But my first coloring credit is for an 8-page short story in Dark Horse Presents called Fish Police BC, which was like a Jurassic version of the Fish Police, which is already like a weird concept of fish police.
They're police for fish. How is that hard? It says what it is in its title.
I love Fish Police.
Yeah,
there you go.
Yeah.
Shortly after that, I did a Sherlock Holmes series for Dynamite.
Okay.
That was 5 issues, and then that was sort of a trial to do a Shadow series that Pop wrote that was year 1 origin story of the Shadow.
Yeah. So let's maybe talk a little bit about how you got started on Mage. Like, who approached who?
We just knew it was going to be that.
You just knew it was going to be like.
And he kept bugging me. He kept bugging me for a long time, being like, Dad, you need to do Mage again. It's time to do Mage. You need to do Mage. No. He means so far as whether you were going to color it. We both knew you were going to color it. But it was like, you need to do Mage. You need to do Mage. And I was always like, kid, leave me alone. Mm-hmm. Eventually.
Mm-hmm.
And then he and his gal took a trip to Europe. And I made the decision while they were gone, it's going to be Mage next.
Okay.
And they got home, and we picked them up at the airport, and we had dinner, and we had just finished the, was it Grendel Shadow? Or no, it was The Death of Margot Lane. The Shadow book we did, The Death of Margot Lane. We had just finished that before he left. And he got home and he said, all right, so what's next? And I said, what do you want to be next? And he said, Mage. And I said, it's Mage.
Oh, nice. Nice.
Yeah.
That's actually really adorable. That makes my heart just...
Yeah.
Man. So you knew you were ready for this because you had been coloring other things from him, yeah? Is that...
Yeah, I feel, well, with each book, I feel like I get a little bit better. This isn't something that I figured out on book 1, 2, 3. With coloring, it feels like, and especially from artist to artist, it feels like it's really just a nonstop journey. I'm not really even satisfied now with the way that my work looks. Even if I look at a page a week ago, I'm not very satisfied. So, I see Pop smiling there.
Yeah.
That's one thing I always say to people is, if you come to my house, I don't have any of my own art on display at all. I had down in my studio, I have my books and merchandising and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But if the stuff was hanging upstairs in my living space, I couldn't bear it. I would only be looking at the part of it I don't like.
Right.
An artist really needs to always have a sense of unsatisfaction. Mm-hmm. If you get too satisfied, if you look at something and think that's perfect, you're done.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Okay, nothing I do I look at and think it's perfect, and he inherited that, obviously.
Yeah. Did you have any trepidation working with him on this?
Well, no, we had already done 2 projects together. We did Grendel versus the Shadow and the Shadow. The Death of Margot Lane. Again, he grew up in my studio. We speak the same language creatively. Every issue I'll put together, a few color notes, but Brennan, it's not much generally, right?
One more time, sorry, that one cut out a little bit.
I tend to give you a few color notes, but it's not much. If I want something very specific,
he'll give me some color notes. And lately they've been fewer and fewer. I think the last issue was like 3 pages had a color note each, and that was it for the whole issue. So very minimal these days as far as notes. He kind of just lets me go. When I started Mage, and when I first started coloring for Pop, it was what he was writing, not drawing. And when I first was coloring his interior pages was with the Grendel versus Shadow series. And I had done covers for him, but never interior pages, and that's a whole different ballgame. So what I was really looking at back then was the coloring that Dave Stewart had done on his Mad Monk and Monster Men series. Mm-hmm. Dave informed me creatively back in the day. He gave me a few tips and tricks in Photoshop that I still use today. And he gave me all the brushes, the beautiful brushes that I still use today.
Yeah.
This was when he was first starting out in his career as a colorist. Dave lives kind of near us. And, of course, David colored a bunch of my stuff. He did Trinity, and he did the 2 Batman series he mentioned. And so I called Dave up and said, hey, man, if this is a pain in the ass, just say no. But, my kid is starting to color professionally, and he wants to know if he can come out and just hang out with you for a day and pick your brain and watch what you do. And Dave was very gracious and said yes. Mm-hmm. And as Brennan said everything he showed me that day, I still use every day today.
Yeah.
For the most part, the tricks that I picked up in college and high school with Photoshop were very minimal. And then what Dave gave me is still minimal. I'm no Photoshop expert at all. I just know a few tricks, and I apply them in a way that I would if I were painting traditionally.
Yeah. Color has always been important to Mage.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not only because...
That was when we first met, that was what... I remember you just gushing over the color. You were so enthused by the color,
And not just that, but you also were... You had a lot of theories about how it worked, and I remember us having a conversation where you were telling me about the world mages and which colors they were, and like a lot of stuff that you ended up jettisoning. I think. But I remember you really thinking about that a whole goddamn lot, particularly because it was Kamiko's first color book, and I
Mm-hmm.
think you took it a lot more seriously. So Brennan, when you're approaching this third series, like, are you looking at? Did you go back and look at the first two again and sort of build a palette against that? Like, tell me a little bit about that process.
Okay, so yeah, what I was going for is kind of like a fusion of what the airbrush look that Pop had on the first book, and then the digital, like very poppy colors of Jeremy Cox in the second one. I think there was a lot to be gained looking at both of them, but a lot of areas to improve on as well. I thought so. That's kind of what I'm going for. Also,
he's the best Mage colorist.
Yeah. Were there particular elements of the color palette that you're like, oh, I've got to use this, or I can't use this, or I don't know. I mean, because honestly, your job, Brennan, is the one job in comics I don't actually understand. I know that color makes everything better, but I literally don't understand how.
I'd say a lot of colorists don't either.
I think that the main thing that I'm adding to the colors here, the difference, is a more like grounding in reality. The first two are very saturated, almost like too much so at times, to where the saturated moments don't pop because they're everywhere. Sometimes you need like a muted backdrop for that green to really shine through, that purple. And so that's really something that I've tried to bring to this third installment of Mage, is sort of that ruddiness, that like grounding in reality.
Brennan also is good at understanding the storytelling of coloring, how coloring is absolutely an element, like the lines, like the design of the panels, that helps move you through a story, helps accent the drama.
Did you have conversations before you started the book of how to approach it? Here's what
Brennan,
I'm
I can't
going
remember,
for.
did we?
What? One more time? Sorry, I just got out a little bit there.
He said...
So my question is did you have conversations before you actually started doing the book of, here's what the palette we're going to use, these are the colors, this is the feeling
and I said,
want.
I can't really remember. Did we, or
No,
not much?
You sent me the first page of issue 0, which is just Kevin standing in a back alley. And I just attacked it because I knew what I was going to do. I knew I was going to do kind of muted purplies because it was at night, and I wanted his flesh to really feel like pinky purple. And I just attacked it, and you had a few tweaks on it, I think, but for the most part, I nailed that first one, and then we just rolled from there.
Yeah, do you agree with
Yeah,
that? Okay,
yeah.
very good.
There's really a lot less pre-planning going on than you think. For the most part, my job is to leap in and just do it.
Nice. Yeah, I can't think of a lot of fathers and sons working together, particularly, from base art, writing and drawing, color, right? Like, I can't think of anyone who does that. It's a fascinating relationship between the two of you. Do you still work the same way you used to? I mean, obviously not. You're not flatting colors and things like that, but are you still working pen and paper?
I still work analog.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, I still work old school. It's just what I know.
Yeah.
But on something like Mage or anything where I'm not writing for another artist, where I am doing both the story and the writing myself, I don't write. I take very few notes. I don't really write a lot of things out. I don't do a script first. I start drawing.
Thumbnails or
I sometimes do thumbnails. They are so scribbly, like they only make sense to me.
Sure.
Like if I showed you, you'd be like, "What the hell is this?"
Yeah.
It's more just looking for the weight on the page,
Yeah.
and the number of panels and that sort of thing. But then I just start drawing, and as I'm drawing it, I'm writing it in my head. I'm figuring out what the characters are saying. And then after it's all drawn, then I write the script to match.
Yeah. So the thing you said just a second ago, though, how conscious are you of the rhythm of the page? And how much of it is instinctual? I don't know if that's
I'm very conscious of it. Yeah,
okay.
It's instinctual, but I'm also very conscious of it.
Right.
I'm very much... I'd have to go through and show you panel by panel, but
sure.
You see, this is over here so that, it doesn't overweigh this, and this will lead my eye down here to this, and then that will bring you over here. And here we need to pull back so we get another little quick view of the scene. And then we need to zoom in again.
Yeah. But you're not doing thumbnails, you're just doing it on the page?
I do thumbnails, but they are scribbly wibblies.
Okay.
They're just very, 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 very base.
Nothing,
anytime you see something on Facebook, some comic book artist posted, here's my layouts, mine doesn't look anything like that. Mine look like stick figures.
Sure.
Not even,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But then I'm drawing directly on the page, yeah.
Okay.
I found with this one, too, with the, when we put these together, the first two series we put into big fancy hardcovers, and I had a lot of extra stuff in the back. I don't have as much extra stuff.
Yeah.
I didn't do a lot of sketching off the page.
Yeah.
I also didn't scan the pencils. There's no pencil record of this whatsoever.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Slowed me down.
Okay.
It was unimportant.
Yeah.
I work with pretty bare pencils.
Right.
I like to draw with the ink.
Yeah.
The old Kevin Smith line about being in the tracer.
Yeah.
Every stage of it needs to be intriguing to me and interesting to me and creative to me.
Yeah.
And that's why, when I'm penciling, I'm basically pacing and constructing. And then with the ink, I'm rendering.
Yeah.
And Brennan's seen my pencils. There's not much rendering in them at all.
Yeah.
They're very contourish.
I guess the thing I'm trying to understand though is how do you know that your pacing works for the length of the issue to hit all your notes if you're not pre-planning it extensively?
I'm just good at it.
You're just good at it. No, that's cool. No, that's a great idea. No, I like that.
It's like if Jimmy Page picked up a guitar, he wouldn't have to plan out what the hell he was going to do, right?
Sure.
He'd just start playing.
Sure.
I will say when I got to the last issue, I made myself a list. All right, here's all the narrative elements you have up in the air.
Yeah. Did I resolve them?
You're juggling all these. You got to catch them all before the end of the series.
Did you catch them all?
I caught them all. Yeah.
Is Dai still?
And the funny thing is, even down to the very last 2 pages, I was drawing it, and I suddenly figured out something that Miranda, that the daughter was going to do. Brandon, you'll love this. Do you remember Domino? Brandon, can you hear me? Do you remember Domino? We had these 2 cats at one point.
Yeah.
They had 2 names. They were Pai Mei, which is the kung fu teacher from Kill Bill, and Mubai, who's the hero from Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. I used to call them the Kung Fu Kitties.
Yeah.
And for some reason, my daughter was quite young at the time, just decided, nope, I'm calling that one Domino. And we couldn't talk her out of it. And she was just fucking adamant. And at the end there, she's petting the cat, which is we've met this cat. It's a familiar, but all of a sudden I decided I'm going to have her say, I'm going to call you Domino. And I only decided that at that second as I was scripting it.
Yeah.
So it's important for me that it's always a process like that. That it's never that I've got it all figured out and I'm just going through the motions.
Sure.
So. Don't tell her that yet. By the way,
I always wonder when you're dealing with something that has such a structure, right? It's not like.
I said, I stumbled through and hit all the notes from the hero's journey.
Sure.
Instinctively.
Sure.
In the first one.
Yeah. It's just, again, it's another 15-issue miniseries. It's not... I mean, I guess you could have done a 16th issue if it ended up that way. But,
well, it is 16 issues, basically, because the last one's double-sized. So it's 16 issues worth of
material. What I mean?
Oh, you mean if I didn't fit it all in, I could
do it? Right, you could always add one, right? Because it doesn't really matter.
No, it doesn't.
I'm fascinated that you're not really in the structure ahead of time. Is Dai still editing?
She basically copy edits.
Okay.
I said to her, "How do you want to be billed?" Because she edits my copy, and then I take some of her suggestions and not some of the others.
Yeah.
Because she tends to be very precise, and
Yeah.
I'm like, "Well, I don't care. People don't talk like that."
Yeah.
And or I just like the way that word looks better like that.
Yeah.
You know? She and I used to argue all the time about the word funner.
Yeah.
It's like, no, it's more fun. I was like, but that's not funner.
Yeah.
So she, what was the term she came up with? Consulting editor.
Okay. Is she the only eyes on this?
Yeah. Mm-hmm, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I'm sure there's typos in the. Actually, no. There's Image has a proofreader who's quite good. Who
Okay.
always manages to find a few things
Okay.
that we correct like at the last minute.
Okay.
But,
What about story and plot though? You're just rolling ahead
Never,
because
ever,
you're the
ever.
badass. All right.
never ever. I just don't.
No,
You're not going to tell me about my stories. Fuck
yeah,
you.
sure. Sure. Well, but don't you think that a good editor helps you build a story?
If you need that, yes.
Yeah.
Look at him. Sour face.
No,
yeah, Brennan, with some people it's necessary.
Yeah.
Just not with me.
So you don't think so, Brennan? That an editor is not. What's your opinion on an editor then?
Well, the editor is not a writer; they're an editor.
Yeah.
No, I don't know.
Okay.
On this one, he's the editor, really.
Sure.
Okay.
No, I mean, I know that there are definitely creative people who can use editing.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
There are a lot of creative people who really need someone to go, no, you have 40 pages too many in this draft. Or whatever that is. Like, oh, this character doesn't make any sense, actually.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that outside eyes kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But you're always your own outside eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
It would be, to be
outside
honest,
eyes?
it would be hard for me to trust somebody who hasn't written something themselves to tell me how to write something.
Fair enough.
He's right. Mm.
Fair enough. All right. Wow.
I mean, I also just, again, for me, I just treat everything like such a creative Zen journey.
Yeah.
That, when they say to me, if they said to me in issue 2 or 3, well, this doesn't work for this reason. Yeah, but you're not imagining what I already have planned in number 9.
Right.
And I'm not going to tell you about it right now.
Sure.
It's coming. Believe me. Shut up.
Sure.
Correct the grammar.
Sure. Yeah. No, it's fascinating because, as I said, I told you earlier, we've done 3, this is our 3rd and a half year, I think, of these graphic novel clubs. I've talked to 80 or 90 cartoonists at this point. Nobody works the same way.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Literally nobody works the same way, right? Yeah. Yay is right.
Great.
There are people who make the most detailed thing, and then they have an editor look over it, and the editor makes changes, and then they build it that way, and then there are guys like you who are just like, no, fuck you.
So I
know how to fucking do comics.
Right.
Yeah.
And again, for me, it's I'm walking through my story.
Right.
So I got a funny tale about that too. Many years ago, I was to a con in England, and Bob Chapman was with me and his wife at the time, and so I also had, after the convention in London, I had a signing in Scotland. So on the way, we stopped and spent the night at Alan Moore's house.
Nice.
And that was a great, unique experience. But at the time, he was doing High Numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Does everybody remember? Big Numbers. Numbers. High Numbers was the Who.
Yeah, with Sienkiewicz.
Yes, with Sienkiewicz, and then with, who was the guy?
Al Columbia.
Al Columbia. All right, so that was famously going to be a 10-issue series. He had it planned out. So he took me up to his writing room, and he had one of those giant sketch pads, that artists use for model drawings, And he had it divvied off into 10 columns this way, ruled lines.
Yeah.
And then there were probably 30 characters.
Yeah.
So they had 30 columns this way.
Yeah.
Leaving, here's the name of the character, and then for each issue there's a square like about that big.
Yeah.
And in the smallest, tightest, little psychotic handwriting you've ever seen, he's filled in everything that happens to that character. This whole sheet is just covered.
Yeah.
He's got it all the way planned out. And I said, man, you and I don't work alike at all.
That's beautiful. Yeah.
But that's the whole point. That's a great thing about creative endeavors in particular, but also comics are real freeform and real. There is no right way. There is no wrong way.
Yeah. Have you ever hit a point where you felt like you needed or wanted an editor?
Not really.
Okay.
Every editor I've ever worked with, I worked with Archie Goodwin, worked with Diana for years, worked with Karen Berger, later with Shelley Bond, Bob Schreck. The one common thing all of them understood was shut up and get out of his way.
Yeah.
Just let him do it.
Yeah.
I'll never forget Archie called me one time. This is back when I did faces for Legends of the Dark Knight, and there was one panel in the Batcave where Batman's picking up his... I drew it as a helmet. Mm-hmm. And this is before it had become standard that it was a helmet. Mm-hmm. And he called to tell me the company line that, well, traditionally it's made out of cloth. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, how do the little ears stand up then? And that was the end of that.
Yeah.
That's it. I never really...
Yeah. I still remember when I had you draw my Yellow Pages ad. The Superman.
That was for you. That's right. Yeah.
He drew a Yellow Pages ad. It was Superman, and he drew it, and it was a fantastic, just great, like headshot, really Superman looking. We sent it to DC, and they're like, no, and we're like, what?
This is a funny story, though.
It doesn't have the S. Superman's curl is actually an S.
Yeah.
I had been reading Superman comics. You had been reading Superman comics for decades, and we never had realized that the curl on his forehead is an S.
Okay, that's because my Superman is the Fleischer Superman's,
sure.
and in the Fleischer cartoons, it's not an S.
Sure, okay, fine. But it's,
But yeah, I didn't realize it either.
Yep.
Funny.
So he had to go and redraw a little S on it, and then it was acceptable. And,
that one, actually, I was like, all right, well, that one makes sense. I'll do that one.
Oh, man, I love it.
But I got to say, I'm like this even... I almost do no outside of comics work. Mm-hmm. Illustration, advertising work, any of that. And the main reason is there's always going to be an art director trying to put his thumb on it somewhere.
Right.
Because they got to do something to feel like they're earning their money, Mm-hmm. And so I had this, a neighbor of mine came down, and I live in Portland, and there's a big, very well-respected children's hospital called Dornbecker Children's Hospital. And they were doing this series of posters, an advertising campaign within the hospital, and they were using all children's book illustrators and such. And the whole approach to the campaign was to help alleviate children's fears of extended hospital stays. Mm-hmm. And great, So my neighbor was working at this ad agency and asked me, we want to get a comic book person in there. Would you be willing to do this? And I was like, nah, you don't want to work with me. And she's like, no, we'd really like. Nah, I don't play well with others. It's just no, I don't want to do that. And finally she begged me, and I was like, all right. And I quoted her some pretty high price, and they came back and said sure. And so then she left that ad agency, and then I had to work with other people they were all after me to do this. And I was like, oh no, I did that just because I said yes to Jen. She's my neighbor. I don't really want to do it. I don't want to do it. Forget about me. And turns out they had gone up to the children's hospital and presented this campaign to the board. Mm-hmm. And one dude on the board went, you can get Matt Wagner? And boom, he was dead set on it, And so she said, look, he really wants you, and can you do it? And I was like, look, believe me, I won't do any fixes. I said, if I do this, you're going to get one piece out of me, because this isn't important to me. I don't have time to do this. It's not my job. I do other things. I was like, believe me, you don't want me. And she said, well, we really want this comic book element. Are there any other comic book artists in Portland? Now, I don't know if you know Portland or not, but it's lousy with comic book artists. My joke is you can't spit without hitting one of us.
We all know there are none.
Yeah.
I'm it. Sorry. Yeah.
But there's a collective downtown that's gone through a variety of names. His most recent name is Helioscope. It's a collective of probably 30 different creators, male, female, mainstream, indie. I said, here, go check out their website. I guarantee you're going to find somebody there you need, because they will certainly meet your desires, and I bet they'll be willing to do changes. Mm-hmm. And they got 4 other examples, and they took it up, and that guy was just stuck on me, and he just and And I said, no, really, come on. I really tried to talk my way out of this over and over and over again. Finally, I said, all right, I'll do it. But listen, I'm telling you, I'm doing one drawing, and that's it. I'm not going to redo it. Not going to. And so I did it, and they loved it. And then the art director at Dornbecker Children's Hospital sent his list of changes that he wanted. And they just knew. They were like, they just paid me my fee and cut me loose.
Yeah.
They're like, well, he's not going to do it. So,
And they didn't end up using the work?
No.
No,
crazy. They paid me my full fee. Yeah.
Crazy. Wow.
They actually did, but that's the world of advertising. I heard a story about the Portland Art Museum got all the art for Robert Crumb's Book of Genesis.
Yeah.
That was touring for a while. And so the same ad agency had done a television ad with God as drawn by Robert Crumb going, come on out and see the show. They filmed the whole damn thing. And then somebody said, you can't have God in the just dumped it. I know this was $50,000 or so.
Sure. It's just very unusual to be able to work in the way that you do. You recognize that, right?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. But I'm not gonna change.
No, I get that. But so I guess my question is so the comics have changed. The world of comics has changed.
Oh wait, I got a joke though to add on that.
Please add the joke. Yeah.
This is a. All illustrators understand this joke. How many art directors does it take to change a light bulb? Only one, but does it have to be a light bulb? I believe you. Every artist I tell that to goes,
yeah. So I'm trying to circle around to comics today and what they are, and that if you,
I don't even know if I know what they are anymore.
Yeah. I mean, I sort
and
of.
I guess that's a good thing.
Yeah. No, it is.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It is. I just wonder
leaves me with a certain confusion, but
I mean, you're still doing comics for the next 20 years, right?
Sure, hope so.
Yeah, 30 years. Until the day you die, right?
Yep. Slower and slower.
Sure. Do you think that you still have the freedoms that you had in the 80s and the 90s going forward in the 21st century?
Well, I don't know that I need those freedoms. I mean, I have my niche, and I think those freedoms are there for other young creators, and I think they're doing a lot with those freedoms, and that's the way it should be. I'm probably never going to have that ripe period I had with Grendel there that you're talking about, where I just recreated myself all the time.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think you'll always. I mean, nobody ever quite knows what I'm going to do next.
Sure. Sure. Do you think that there's still? Because you're one of the rare creators who has kind of moved back and forth between creator-owned, company-owned, creator-owned, company-owned. You've really hopscotched your entire career in a way that's not usual. Do you think that those opportunities are still there going forward, given the nature of the way the comics has changed?
No, probably not. Yeah. Probably not for me, yeah.
Yeah. So what does that mean to you as a creative person? Or are you maybe...
Well, I mean, I'm lucky enough. My opportunities at DC and the bigger publishers, I will say, are probably becoming more marginalized as they are farming a younger and more diverse group of creators. But luckily, I have my independent path that's been there for a while, and I have an audience that is not interested in seeing more of my previous narratives. But if I came out with something totally new, I think the market would be receptive to that.
Sure.
In fact, I have something new in mind. And,
okay.
Hopefully, it's going to be me writing it and Brennan drawing it.
Nice.
And coloring it.
Nice. Super nice. That sounds fantastic. So let me ask you this question, Brennan, as a young creator in comics, right? It's kind of difficult right now to break new ideas, to break fresh things. I'm sure that most of the work that's being offered to you is coloring some sort of corporate bullshit one way or the other, right?
Actually, he's doing more indie stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, actually got offered an interview today.
Is it paying well enough to do that as a career?
My wife's the bread maker in our relationship.
Sure. And I'm not trying to put you on the spot about that. I'm just super curious that, I mean, the difference in experience that you guys have, that's sort of what I'm trying to compare and contrast here, Do you feel as a creative person that you have control over your destiny, I guess would be the question.
Oh my. So existential.
Sorry. You can modify that, answer that any way you want to, that you don't have to put the weight on that.
You asked him about freedoms today. I think that in some ways the freedoms are limited, or maybe the opportunities are more limited now because of the saturation of the market and the amount of people. But there are probably more freedoms now. You can do whatever the hell you want in comics. You can publish them however you want. I can publish something online if I want. I can start a website if I want, which, by the way, I just started a website and we are selling Mage prints. If anybody would like awesome Mage prints, go to my website and order them now.
Daddy's boy.
Plug the actual website. Say the actual URL. It doesn't help if you don't say the URL.
Sure, it is BrennanWagner.com.
Brennan, BRENNAN
Wagner.
Wagner, WAGNER.com. Gotta teach him that part too.
We sell prints of all of the Mage covers currently out.
Nice. Very nice. Very nice. I've been talking a lot.
But you were talking there about
sorry.
Do you feel you're in charge of your destiny? I don't know. I think every creative person needs to not be. Needs to feel a little shaky and unsteady all the time. Mm-hmm. Again, if you get too complacent or you get too if you're sucking too much fat,
sure,
you're not hungry anymore.
Sure, but you
don't want to be living hand to mouth and worrying that you're not going to be able to pay the rent. But
I would argue that you're one of the really lucky people who hit in a period.
Oh yeah, I am
that you were able to monetize your craft and have a middle class lifestyle where you raised two beautiful children and your wife didn't have to work if she didn't want to.
Well, yeah, she did. But yeah, for a period.
Right? Like you really had the life that is not. I don't know that that's as common for craftsmen today.
When people come up to me and ask me advice on how I got started and everything, I always say, "Don't ask me. I'm the wrong guy to ask." Yeah. I was lucky. I was in the right place at the right time. The world was different then. Yeah. The advice I'm going to give you is going to be useless to you. Yeah. Go ask that guy.
Have you ever thought about doing explicitly like YA stuff?
Yeah, and in fact, the thing I have in mind for him would be all ages.
Okay.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because that really seems like that's where the market's moving right now.
Yeah, and I feel I can do that. I mean, I guess that's. I feel if you look at my stuff. I'm never too dark or too light. Mm-hmm. My dark.
Sometimes you're really dark. Sometimes.
Yeah, but it's not. Yeah. But there's lots of guys.
There's a couple of times.
There's lots of guys that are a lot darker and downright gross.
Sure.
And my stuff's never that. It can be horrifying.
Sure.
But also my more lighthearted stuff has a sense of consequence, has a sense of repercussion, has a sense of, but it can still have a happy ending, and it can still have humor, and it can still make you smile.
Yeah. So I've been talking a lot. Michael's got his hand up already. He knows what I'm about to say. Who would like to ask a question? Michael, would you like to ask that question, please?
Yes. Hello. First, thank you very much. Very much enjoyed. And
thanks.
Looking forward to reading all the back ones as well.
Oh, right on. Great.
You talked a lot about putting yourself into your work.
Mm-hmm.
And I know from reading some other authors, Grant Morrison in particular, he wrote about seeing how when he wrote himself into characters, sometimes the character experiences would find its way back into him.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm wondering is, as you've written yourself in here, do you ever find that the actions of your characters or experiences of your characters preceded your own experiences, or that there was a give and take?
Yeah, and there's a few things in upcoming issues that I can't quite reference directly without being spoilery. But yes, of course it does happen. You know, you are defined by your creation even as you are defining it. And that's just inevitable. If you are being honest, you know.
Okay.
Again, I can't get into too many specifics about. I'm thinking of a couple of incidences in the last two issues that.
Mm-hmm. But were presaged in your life, or
Just kind of a synchronicity there that wasn't, planned.
Okay. Okay. Can you think of something that has already seen print that fits that meter?
No, just because I'm so focused on this one now.
Yeah. You finished Mage. Mage is done.
Yep.
For you.
Mage is done.
Yeah.
I finished the art about 2 weeks ago. I finished the script about 3 days ago.
Nice.
And it is definitely the end. It ends.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm coloring it right now.
Are you? You want to show us some? You want to show us something? Not that we shouldn't see, but I know you said that you had a little bit of process that you could show us.
Yeah, I could do a screen share. I'm not going to screen share the pages that I was just working on because they are spoilery as heck.
Yeah.
But
we don't want spoilers, not yet. I would like to see how it ends properly.
Let me see if this works. So I hit screen share.
Yeah. It should be pretty straightforward.
Your entire screen. Okay. Here we go. Is it working?
Yeah. Move us out of the picture.
Okay. So here's the cover.
Yeah, there you go.
All right, so here we got a cover. This is the cover to the second collection. You had the first collection there in your hand.
Of Denied, yeah.
Yeah.
Of Denied. So this is the second cover there. And here is what it looks like when it gets to me. Okay.
Wow, that's really different.
Yes, it is. A lot of, like Pop said, he does a lot of contour. And especially when he's doing energy effects and stuff like that, he's thinking of it in terms of line and black and white. And I, of course, have to solve that by making it colorful. And
Which I knew he was going to do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now, it's funny. Everybody kind of like, about how much change that is. From the very beginning of me working in comics, it's always been my ideal. Sometimes I hit it, sometimes I don't. That you need the complete everything to make it work. So you can't just look at the art without the script. You can't just read the script without the art. None of it works as well without the color, and of course the lettering comes into play too. Hey, Brennan, hang on before you clip it around there. Let me finish this, and then you can narrate that. Anyway, there's a very famous quote from Edgar Allan Poe that in a short story, every word must tell. And I've always had that attitude towards comics, that every element of every panel has to tell, has to be a vital part of what's going on. It's the same reason I don't do super tight pencils and then just ink over that. I want the ink to be as much a part of the drawing as the penciling was. Anyway, Brennan, describe your process a little bit there. What is that you're showing us now?
okay, so these are what are called flats, and this is how the coloring process starts. Is I of course I'm first given a black and white like we saw, and then I make polygons. I hire this out on interior pages just because it's too much work. On covers, I usually just do it myself because it's pretty darn quick with the covers. But it starts with these polygons. The polygons allow me to work within a certain shape. Let's say it's the skin. I will select all of the skin, and then I'm just working within Kevin's skin, which is really easy. And one great aspect of Photoshop, it's in the traditional analog world, it's called masking. You would be using literal masking tape to section off areas so that your paint wouldn't drift out of those areas. And Photoshop makes that super easy for me.
You used to literally lay down tape.
Yeah, it's called Frisket. It's a clear sheet with adhesive on the back.
Yeah.
I would hire that out too. My art school buddies that didn't have a job, I'd be like, look, man, $5 a page, sit down there. And they'd sit there with an X-Acto knife and cut out all those damn backgrounds.
Oh, man.
Yep.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Really stoned.
So then, then I really I kind of leap into it. With this one, I started on the left side first, so you can see I added some shading and some general just light and stuff. And then here's the little background. And then I tackled the right side. And then I added some effects. So the effects all go on top of the inks here. And they add a whole bunch. Like this here is taking away the darkness of the line art in the right column there to really kind of set it back further. And there's the energy. There you go.
Wow. I just watched that and I still don't understand it. I think it's amazing, but like I don't get how your brain is able to separate those things to make a cohesive whole.
One step at a time.
Yeah. I understand how your brain works mostly, right? Like I get the drawing a line, I get that, but this part is like, what? What? That's some three-dimensional shit there. Yeah. Yeah. We have another question from the audience. Yes, please.
I was just thinking about how it's interesting because you're the full team player. As much as I love your art, I also I think you're a fantastic writer.
Thank you.
Even when you're not putting a line on the page. Saying a Mystery Theater comes to mind. I was thinking about Madame Xanadu. Madame Xanadu. You might have one of the longest continual Mike Kaluta runs of anyone. Sequential art by him.
Sad part is, before that book got canned, he wanted to do another one. I had a great idea in mind too.
Oh, man.
Set in New York in the 70s.
Yeah.
That is sad.
And I had a terrific idea which I can't share with you, but I ran into Mike at a convention and we were lamenting that the book got canceled, and I said, "Oh man, I had such a great idea for what we were going to do next." And he's like, "No." It's like, "I don't want to hear about a story I don't get to draw."
I guess I noticed most of your writing work it seems to be more for DC. Do you ever have any Marvel stories where it's like, I could totally do a 6-issue thing for?
Strangest thing, man. Marvel has never shown any interest in me whatsoever.
Right.
Yeah. The one thing I did for them, Ultimate Marvel Team Up, I drew #1. That was all Bendis. Bendis, it had such success with the first starts of the Ultimate Universe that they were giving him a free hand to do. He said, "I want to do Marvel Team Up, but Ultimate Marvel Team Up, and I want to use all my favorite indie creators." And he called me, and I said, "Well, if I can get the first issue and we can do Spider-Man and Wolverine, that'd be great." And he said yes. But other than that, Marvel has never approached me to do anything. And I have no idea why.
So you dictated that story to him?
No, not at all.
Oh, okay.
No. Just that that's
I want Spider-Man and Wolverine.
Yeah, sure. If I'm going to do this, go for it, man. And he's like, "Yeah, that won't be a problem.
Yeah.
It'll be fine."
Yeah.
So.
I'm just thinking how, as far as you're talking about big significant things earlier. You were talking about how Edsel, was a black heroine, and it's like, black girls, well, why not, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking about there was an aborted project, the Aerialist, which I thought had some of those beautiful black and white art I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
One of those cases where sometimes black and white is nicer than color, and that was like an early gay. That was like years before Midnight or.
That was. I started the Aerialist when Comix had gone down, and I was just really pissed off, and I wanted to do something that challenged a lot of societal norms. Now, in the interim, both Mage and Grendel kind of came back to me, and so the Aerialist is like the one project I've ever done that that will never be finished. Because truthfully, when you look at it, I was poking the social beast, but you know, gay people aren't shocking anymore, and this city in the sky, you know, survived mainly by growing marijuana. That's not shocking anymore either.
Right.
You know, so I just had nowhere to go with it. Luckily, the idea I have in mind for Brennan and I to do, my original thought was to do a trilogy set in that world, and that each book of the trilogy would be named after a different member of that society. So the first one, the Aerialist, was a professional athlete. Then there would be another character in the second book, but the third book was an idea I had in mind that I'm actually hoping to turn into this YA thing with Brennan.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Nice. How much Aerialist is finished? I gotta feel like
Was it two, something like that?
But-
Two, three of them?
Yeah, but I feel like there's like 30 pages.
Maybe.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, they were only 8. Were they only 8 pages?
Maybe they were. Yeah.
8 pages a piece, something
Okay,
like that. Yeah. It was in
okay.
Dark Horse Presents, so they
Yeah.
weren't long.
Yeah. The other thing I remember that you.
I remember Dark Horse when I first turned in that first page, which is a big, you know, the guys are fighting and
Yeah.
all these big, beautiful balloons and everything, and they're like, wow, great. And then, you know, 2 pages later, there's a male-on-male blowjob, and
Right.
it was just like, oh, no!
I also remember there was a thing you were doing in that interim period when Comix collapsed. You were going to do a card project that was 2 sisters.
Yep.
And
It was going to be a sex project.
It was a sex project,
Yeah.
and it was told through trading cards.
Yeah.
Which,
Yeah, it was. Trading cards were a big thing back then, and
Yeah.
I was very enamored of that as a possible storytelling device. I wouldn't do it that way now.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was the story of 2 women. They weren't sisters, but they were just 2 women that
Okay.
compared and contrasted their sex lives from like the, you know, young days to old days.
Yeah.
And this is when one time editor said something to me. Diana said something about, how are you not going to moralize that?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's right. I need to think about that, and I need to make sure that one of them doesn't come off as the right sexuality and the other one's the not right sexuality. But
Is that why you abandoned it ultimately, or
just got busy with other shit.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know. I don't know if I'll ever finish that. Yeah.
Always curious.
Yeah.
Always curious.
Yeah.
Seth?
You had a question.
I quickly want to jump back to the Comix Experience ad that you drew. That it wasn't just that you had to draw a Superman curl on his forehead. It was enormous, and it stood out on that Yellow Pages very bland page in an incredible way. Like
You mean the drawing itself or the S?
No, just
I don't remember making the curl that
drawing
big.
itself. I mean, it wasn't like, you know, a pompadour or anything, but it was just big enough that was definitely Superman, and I remember that page very clearly.
Oh yeah.
5 years later.
When there's the Yellow Pages.
When there's the Yellow Pages.
But
Yeah.
anyway, so the question I have is do you? I mean, it's one thing that I didn't really understand until hearing you guys talk was that you actually took a lot of risks in the 80s and, you know, even into the early 90s. Do you think that young creators are taking enough risks?
I'd have to say so. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And they'll only take more. Or, you know, if it's not risks, then at least they're taking stuff that would, like I just explained there about, you know, gay sex isn't shocking and marijuana cultivation isn't shocking. At least they're taking the approach that the stuff that would be risky and shocking just isn't because it isn't.
Right.
And I think that's really great and healthy too.
I mean, what counts as a risk today? Like, it's not.
Yeah, I don't know,
necessarily
man. What does? Yeah, I don't know.
Well, I don't think a person could have a career in the way that you did, where you were learning to draw.
Oh no, yeah.
Right, like that's gone. Those
That's
days are gone.
Yeah. You couldn't
Those days are
grow
gone.
up in public like I did.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you've got to actually have a fully formed idea. And kids are going to school now, and we're graduating 50, 60 kids a year who have graduated from comic school,
Mm-hmm.
who are expecting to do comics,
Mm-hmm.
and their thought process, I think, is that they're going in and doing a 200-page story. Can you even imagine doing a 200-page story when you were 20? You know,
Well,
like, that Mage would have been a graphic novel.
Oh yeah,
right?
no. Well, of course we didn't think of it. You know,
Sure.
everything was serialized in those days. You know, there was no other conception. You know? I mean, I at the time was already thinking of it, even though there weren't real, as you said, a whole lot of collections.
Yeah.
Collected editions. I was already thinking of it that way. You know, chapter 1, chapter 2 of a complete story. You know, I knew it was going to end at a certain. Oh, there's this cat.
Oh, kitty.
I knew it was going to have a distinct beginning, middle, and end. And it's funny, when I was growing up, I was mainly a DC Comics fan because I lived out in the country, like I said, and my access to comics was mainly at the grocery store, or the drugstore, or whatever. And when my mom was in the mood, you know. So I like DC Comics because they always ended the same issue. Whereas the Marvel stuff went on and on and on, and then I grew up to write these long, ongoing, epic stories that weren't what appealed to me when I was a kid. But
and really, truly epic stories. When you look at Grendel, particularly its multi-generational history of a world, fascinating. No one else could get away with that. I don't know.
Or they couldn't. They couldn't. They couldn't feel their way through it like I did.
Yeah.
I didn't have Grendel all planned out at the beginning.
Sure.
I took opportunities that were like, all right, now I get to do this. Well, if I get the chance, I'm going to go do it like this.
Yeah.
But yeah, as you said, you need to sell a complete worldview, a complete pitch, a complete structure already.
And I wonder if this changes the art that's being produced, because
it has to,
this
right?
is the world that they're in, right?
It has to,
Yeah.
That's sort of what I meant by taking risks, right? Like you can't just sort of
make it up as you go along, like I do.
Or fill your way through a story, or do that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, you can't.
Yeah, my example is usually Ghost World by Klaus, right? That was serialized in 8-Ball, and he never figured out how to end it. You know, and if it had been a graphic novel, he would not. He would have stopped. He would have given up. He would have produced 80 pages and gone, nope. And I think that we're in a better world to get the 80 pages where you don't know how to end.
The 80 pages of maybes, yeah.
I just think that that's better, and I think that there's something that's missing.
Well, but because that's, you know, it's often said that. You know, the mistakes are what make art interesting. Yeah. You know, it's why I like to work with loose pencils, because as I'm drawing with the ink, I'm going to do, you know, if I had already penciled that out very delicately, and I like going in there with my pen and just, you know, making marks and see, oh, cool, okay, I'll go like that over here, you know, and I'll pull this pen like that, you know, and
yeah, the restaurant just closed.
Okay.
They're dumping the night's booze.
Got it. So yeah, it's the mistakes that make art interesting, and you know, I don't know. I think that even follows through with a lot of. Now, Brennan's really good, I think, at if anybody's seen any of the. Brennan, throw up some of your those pieces you've been doing recently, like the Hereditary piece and.
Yeah, one second.
Yep. I find a lot of digital rendering lacks those mistakes.
Yeah.
Because people don't treat it like paint, basically.
Sure.
Whereas I think Brennan does. He's going to show you a couple pieces here.
Okay.
Yeah, I have been doing a bunch of personal pieces that are mostly posters. Okay, here's the one he was talking about.
Oh, that's nice.
This is my latest piece. This is probably what he's talking about, is just the amount of messiness going on. My willingness to let the marks drift outside occasionally of their of the zone that I'm trying to keep them in. You know, just a little surrendering, a little control is probably good for achieving that analog look with digital paint.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there's a liveliness there that you don't see as much in digital.
Yep.
Yeah. Do you? Because a lot of your career, you've talked about being an independent artist. You talked about punk rock ethos. You've talked about a lot of stuff that almost seems contradictory to having this generational relationship where your own son is part of the next generation. Does that make sense?
I don't know why would the two contradict.
I don't know, because one's
one doesn't forswear an interest in the future.
Sure. No. Sure. I'm not trying to be aggressive with that question.
No. I'm trying to figure out what you mean.
Yeah. I mean, I just feel like it's really unusual to work with your children to bring that forward. I don't know. I didn't form a question right there.
There again, everything of my career, just kind of stumbled into it. I mean, I didn't grow up.
Yeah.
I didn't. As Brennan was growing up, there's another one from the George Romero classic Martin about the.
Very nice.
Anyway, I never tried to push Brennan into comics. I gave him lots of comics because I knew he would love reading them. But during that transitional period there where he was talking about how he might go into photography, I never said one way or the other which I wanted him to do.
Yeah.
Because I really didn't have an opinion.
Yeah.
I wanted him to do what he wanted to do.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, it wasn't. We stumbled into it. It wasn't.
Yeah.
It wasn't
Mom
premeditated.
always needed to be a dentist.
Yeah.
Her dad was a dentist. That's why.
I mean, Brennan, do you feel any stress that you're working on something that your dad started 35 years ago before you even were a thought?
There is a certain amount of pressure, I think, to get it right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Certainly. But that pressure I felt. That pressure was most felt on the first gig I did with him, the Shadow gig with Alfredo Torres. The pressure because that was my first kind of higher profile gig. The pay was better. It was way more issues than I had done before. 12, right, Pop? That was 10?
Yep.
12?
Yep, 12, yep.
And the one before that I had done was a Sherlock Holmes story at 5 issues. So it was way more. So the pressure for that one was on. But by the time I had finished, 10 issues is a lot of pages of art. And if each page has 5 panels, each panel deserves its own light source and its own textures and colors and all this stuff. And by the end of 10 issues, 22 pages, however many panels, that pressure feeling is kind of gone now. And now I just approach each gig with full veracity. I want each panel to look the best it can. I'm really bad at sacrificing quality to get the product out faster. I'm pretty terrible about that. I want every page to look really good.
Yeah. Where are you with coloring Mage? Or you're well into 15, I assume? Are you almost done?
Oh
yeah. No.
No, he's not.
Not even close.
8 of 50.
Wow. Okay.
We will be right up to the wire.
Okay. And is that 8 of 50? Is that the 8-page spread, or you haven't even tackled the big boy?
No, but I was looking at it today, and it looks like it's going to be big.
Am I wrong, or?
And it's not. I want to clarify too. When you say it's not an 8-page spread, it's an 8-page gatefold.
Okay.
That means it's 4 pages per side.
Okay.
So the actual gatefold, the central image, the big image is 4. Boom, 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 boom.
Okay.
And then there's 4 corresponding pages on the other side that are just single pages that unfold.
Okay. I was just going from the press release.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Please. Yes.
Given that Mage is such a personal and became an autobiographical thing for you, do you ever run into anxiety over how personal it is? And if so, how do you overcome that? And is there a difference in how you feel as you're creating something that's personal versus something that is less so? Maybe it's DC, maybe it's Brindle, but it's just less you, or are all things you? Sorry, that's like 15 questions.
Yeah, everything you create is, there's an old line that all art is autobiographical, Yeah, occasionally. Like, okay, for instance, in this series, so is it, it's after this collection, so it's in a few issues after this collection. But there's a scene where they're kind of on the run, and Kevin has his daughter with him, and he takes the daughter to his wife's sister's house, who is also a witch who helps them, but he's hoping to leave the kid there. And if Brennan could testify to this, the idea of leaving one of my children with his Aunt Diana for an extended period of time was just out of the fucking question. And so when I wrote that issue, because of course Diana's the consulting editor on the book, I sent it to her and I said, "Well, I hope you're ready for this one." And she loved it. She was like, "I know what my foibles are. That's hilarious. That's great." So
Nice. Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Last. Yeah,
Yeah,
please. Hit it.
So
No, do it.
you mentioned the punk rock and DIY ethos as something that when you started was part of how you saw what you wanted to do in comics. And maybe this is a question for you as much as your son, but what would be the punk rock DIY avenue today? I mean, given that there's digital websites, there's zines, there of course is indie publishing, but just what path would that do you think that would be today if there is such a thing?
No fucking clue.
No,
Yeah, go ahead, Bren.
Okay, so I will bring up an example as my answer. My very close friend and artist on the Spirit book that we did, that Pop wrote, Dan Scotty. He has a web series out called Lavender Jack. It's awesome. Everyone should check it out. But it's told in a scroll fashion. It doesn't have panels necessarily, or even pages. So I'm not even sure how this thing would translate to a book necessarily, or even any kind of paper printed thing like a scroll, or I don't know, because the
papyrus needs to be on papyrus.
Right, yeah, because the way that it's printed digitally online really kind of only works with that. And I think that is probably the closest thing to what you're talking about, the like punk rock of comic books is really doing that, like publishing online and then breaking all the conventions of panels or pages or chapters or whatever. Just telling the story however you want.
But what's missing, and I think what you're commenting about there, what I find is missing is the again, if we're going to use that punk rock analogy, is the slapdash nature of the creativity. In the old days, it'd be like if there was a punk band that was popular, it'd be like, all of a sudden, hey, wait, they're playing like tonight. It had a real like, hey, let's put on a show, let's do it tonight, sort of thing. It used to be that way in comics. In fact, the final issue of The Hero Discovered, the first series. At that point, Joe Matt, does everybody know Joe Matt's work? Joe was my color assistant at that point, and so we were coloring together at that cool convent apartment I had, and we were up all night. I think I didn't sleep for like 30 hours or more, and we had to get it out to the Comix offices, which were outside of Philadelphia. So we worked and worked and worked and worked all through the night, and we finally got it done. And we had to drop it off at the offices that day because this was the last day. The way printing works is you need reserve time on the press, and if you renege on that, then they charge you more, a lot. And so it was really important that we make it there by that Friday. So again, there was this slapdash sort of, and we're staying up all night and we're just like buzzed as shit. And so we finished. We had to run from my apartment to Penn Station in Philadelphia. That was a good, 25 blocks, 30 blocks. Then we had to hop on the train, take the train out to where the Comix offices were, about half an hour outside of Philadelphia. Bob Schreck met us at the train stop, picked us up. We rushed back to the Comix offices where we had to put all the fucking page numbers on by hand, right? Like cut them out. And we jumped in Bob's car and we raced over to the FedEx office Friday afternoon, and we got there 3 minutes before they closed.
Yeah.
And that's punk rock, baby.
Yeah. Nowadays, you just press a button and it's emailed, and you don't even have to think about it.
Oh my God, we got so drunk that night. We both Joe and I slept on Bob and Diana's floor or couches, and we got messed up.
I have similar sort of late night crunches, but as you said, when the work is done for me at 4 a.m, 6 a.m, I just hit send, and that's the beauty of technology.
It's a whole new world. Oh man, comics. Well, the mechanisms change, but the work doesn't.
Yeah, I think that the intent and the love for the medium is still the same.
Yeah.
I love seeing that the specifics of the marketplace confuse me now, but I love seeing this vast array of stories, this vast array of styles, of voices, of creators, of genders, and every source is getting its voice.
Yep.
And the other cool thing about comics that I always said was the immediacy of it. You in the old days, you'd rush your book to the printer, it'd be out like 2 weeks later, and now you got to plan ahead for the book market. Like you got to have it ready your cover ready 9 months ahead of, it's ridiculous. Where did we leave with that thought? Well, I just had a brain fart.
Well, does that leave you room to work the way you want to? The new structures.
It's tough for me. Yeah. Especially an image where you kind of do everything yourself. So I'm wearing many hats over there.
Yeah. So being done with Mage now, do you feel a relief? Do you feel a hole? I don't know.
Not a hole.
What is it? Yeah.
No. It fills me up. It doesn't leave me empty. No, not a hole. I don't know. Maybe the impact of it hasn't really hit me yet. That I'm done.
Well, just because there was an expectation, right? There was an expectation that it's sort of like Dave said with Cerebus. There's thousands of people out there willing him to stay alive to finish it, And now you finish it, and then what happens?
More comics.
Yeah. Just makes me think of that Howard the Duck story.
Just not Mage comics.
What do you do the day after you save the universe?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because that's the next day, and then you've got to do something else.
Yeah.
You have plans, though. You have.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Do you have how many projects do you have figured out, or in a stage?
Oh, only 2.
Only 2? The immediate, 2 is a lot.
The immediate next one, which we're not going to announce till March at the Emerald City Con in Seattle. And that one I'm starting in the next week or so.
Okay.
I don't know. No rest for the wicked, dude.
Yeah.
Or for comic book artists.
Yeah.
The 2 are often the same.
Exactly. Exactly. All right. If there's no other question here, I think my last question. Oh yes, please.
A quick one.
Yeah,
please.
Has the autobiographical aspect of Mage been the most important way of storytelling for you?
No, it's apples and oranges. And I like them both.
Okay.
I like playing. When I get a chance to play with other people's characters, I like that. I always equate it to a band doing a cover song.
Yeah.
And you're acknowledging what inspired you. You're giving it your own twist. I try to not contort it out of shape to where it's unrecognizable. But I mean, obviously, if what you asked there, if it was the most important, that was all I would be doing, right? That'd be the only project I would do. But it's not. I like, people. I used to drive. My kids were at a certain age. You know how kids get to an age and they're like, "What's your favorite? What's your favorite food? What's your favorite movie? What's your favorite?" And I used to just drive them crazy, saying, "I don't have favorites. I don't have favorite food. Sometimes I'm hungry for pasta. Sometimes I'm hungry for barbecue. Sometimes I'm hungry for seafood. What's your favorite movie? Too damn many to count. I don't have a favorite movie. Sometimes I'm in the mood for a crime. Sometimes horror, etc., etc." I say, "Look, I have a favorite wife, I have a favorite son, and I have a favorite daughter, and that's it." Because I only got one of each of them.
Well, thankfully you don't have to choose. So the last question I have, it's like a stupid fanboy stated question, but my 15-year-old self probably wouldn't let me not answer it. Or ask it. So we had Mirth as Mage 1. Waliut in Mage 2. What color is magic? Color is magic.
It's green.
Magic is green.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. I thought there was a different answer.
Nope.
Okay.
Magic's green in its pure
green.
form.
Yeah.
When it's being used by the World Mage.
Yeah.
It gets distorted. The color gets distorted when it's used by other characters.
Yeah. And I'm a little behind actually. Is there a World Mage in Mage 3?
Keep reading.
Okay. I'm a little bit behind. Okay. Very good. Good. No, because I was afraid that we would have why is it called Mage?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, believe me, I had to remember that at the end. No, I knew what was coming. I knew what was coming, but in the final issue, I was like, there has to be a lot of fucking magic in this last issue.
Yeah. Nice. All right.
And there is. Brent, let's close by, you just got to read the finale.
Did it suck? Was it horrible? You're like, oh, fuck, I can't believe my dad just did that. Oh.
No, he's wrong. I haven't read it yet.
Oh, I thought you did.
Even better.
You've seen the art, though.
I've seen the art. He just sent me the majority of the pages for it. I only had the first 20 pages or so. So I know what happens for those, but I haven't read the script past those because I'm working literally right as we're talking. I'm working. This entire conversation I've been working on pages.
That's actually kind of cool.
It is.
That's a little bit cool.
Very cool.
That's a little bit cool.
Yeah.
I have to say, I love your guys' relationship, and I love the fact that you're working on a comic that he started 35 years ago. I just don't know how. That's awesome.
Well, he... go ahead, Bren.
It was really an important read for me too. As a kid, I would give it to all my friends, and all my friends became big fans of it. Probably because it's very accessible. I feel it's definitely the more lighthearted of his books, especially when it's compared to Grendel. But very accessible and just real, good for a young boy. It's action packed and I loved the whole the twist ending of the first book. It got me, It
got me too, man. Man, did that get me. Man, did that get me. I was like, what the fuck? Holy shit. Oh, man, yes.
I remember thinking that too when I was a kid and I read it. And so for me, it's just something I've always loved and wanted to work on. Yeah.
The other thing that makes it accessible is it all looks kind of like people you would or could know. None of them look like gym rats or
right,
or they all look like people you've seen.
Yeah. Do you think that there's any chance that 20 years from now, Brennan, you'll do Mage 4 without Pop?
Oh, that 20 years sounds way too long for that.
Oh. I like that answer. That's a good answer. Let's leave it there. I wanna thank Matt. I want to thank Matt Wagner for everything. Honestly, as I said, I wouldn't have a store. Mage and Grendel are two of my favorite comic creations. They're pure comics. They're beautiful. If you haven't read Mage, if you haven't read Grendel, go go in now and get them. Please. These are great comics. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you, man.
Thank you. All right. Yeah. Quick housekeeping note. Tiny housekeeping note. Next month's book is Maestros. I may be mispronouncing that. Maestros. I don't know. It's Maestro. Maestros. By Steve Scroce.
Yep, pretty sure.
You see?
Yep.
Wow, I'm terrible. This is December.
I already know that because I've heard it pronounced by somebody.
Yeah. This is December's book. Steve's really interesting. Steve has been the storyboard artist for the Wachowskis, as well as working on any number of amazing comics. So this is also going to be, I think, a really interesting conversation. That happens December 12th. If you are looking in. If you have just tuned into this for the first time, go to www.graphicnovelclub.com. Start. You can join. We pick a brand new book every month. We bring the artist or the writer in. We do book plates. It's a really cool club. It's a really good use of your time, and it keeps independent comic shops alive. Matt likes it too. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Brennan. Thank you, Jordan, for running the show. Jordan, yay!
Thanks everybody for coming.
Thanks to everybody. And thanks for all of you for coming out. And thanks, my lovely staff. We will see you next month. Thank you.